Welcome to Knowledge of Self, exploring the fifth element of hip hop as a tool for pedagogy and intervention. I want to introduce my esteemed guest first, and then I'll introduce myself.
Topaz.
Topaz. All right, Topaz representing the South Bronx. Okay? I think when I met you, I told you when I went to Alfred University, the folks from the Bronx is who I vibe with the most. And it was vice versa. They told me, it's like, yo, you could live in the Bronx. You could make it. And I'm like, you can make it in Buffalo too. So it's natural that me and him connected. My name is Will Green, AKA Wilbert Green, AKA Deuce Green, AKA Mr. Green, AKA a whole bunch of stuff because I do a lot of things. I work at UB, but I also own my own educational consulting company. I'm an educator, a consultant, a teacher. I consider myself a teacher. I forgot an AKA professor. Shout out my man, Leo Johnson. Rest in peace. He called me that long before I taught at any college. So here we go. I want to get started. We're going to jump right into a discussion and more of an interview because Topaz is actually a member of the Ebony Dukes, which is a gang that originated in the South Bronx. And he was in this period of time when gangs ran the South Bronx. Now, a lot of folks talk about hip hop and the elements of hip hop. Some people say there are 4 elements. Some people say there are 5 elements. What we're going to talk about is the 5th element, which is knowledge. And I think what we'll discuss here proves the fact that this element of knowledge was really the impetus for hip hop. First question. What was it like growing up in the South Bronx at that time?
If I'm going to talk about the South Bronx, I got to talk about poverty. Because that's the number one element that destroyed us but built us at the same time. Anybody who was alive back then, growing up in poverty, growing up on welfare. So the welfare system was different back then. Welfare was, me and my older sister, we had to go pick up the food twice a week because they didn't give you food stamps. They gave you an allotment of food to last you 2 weeks until you came back for the next allotment. It always ran out. So hunger was just a natural thing because they never gave you enough food to eat. Okay, so you're living in tenements where the landlords, they're never going to fix anything. So most of the time, you don't have heat, you don't have hot water. You got rats, you got roaches. So basically, this is the type of poverty I'm talking about, which I think, first of all, it starts to destroy your self-esteem. So poverty itself, when you feel like you're in that position with no hope, where all this stuff going on around you, I think the next thing that comes is violence. Which I grew up with violence.
And in one of our conversations, you mentioned the projects was a step up.
Where we lived, compared to the projects, which most people thought was poverty, we thought that one day we're gonna, get rich and move to the projects. I remember times, sitting on the toilet bowl, and when you looked upstairs, you can see the person sitting on the toilet bowl in the apartment above you because the ceiling falling was just a natural part of our childhood. So we were like, okay, one day we're gonna have elevators. One day we're gonna have, hot water all the time, heat all the time. We thought these things were luxury because these are just things that we didn't have. In addition to that, I want to talk about poverty. When I say welfare, you couldn't have an adult male working male age in your house, which left a lot of us fatherless. Because the social service department used to come to your house and random checks to make sure you didn't have an adult working male. They made sure you didn't have a television, which was considered a luxury. And they made sure you didn't have a telephone, which was considered a luxury. And they did look around, and they came anytime they wanted to, and they looked around your apartment to make sure you didn't have these things. And if you did have them, they would cut you off.
You can see the existence is difficult, extreme poverty. What other supports existed for Black and Latino families in the South?
On the corner of our block, there was a Black Panther Party headquarters. So the Black Panthers in our neighborhood, they provided security. They carried shotguns, and they were the security for our community. The police really wasn't our security. The Black Panthers were our community, and they also provided food. I specifically had times when the Black Panthers came to our apartment and gave us food to eat when we were hungry. I mean, me and my sisters, there's times we were eating newspaper for dinner, and they brought us cans of soup which was, like I said, that was like filet mignon to us at the time.
We know through government repression, the Panthers were removed from communities. So an intentional thing. So you hear about one of the main resources in the community was the Black Panthers, who had an agenda to serve the community. And once, and this is something that you're going to have to look for yourself about, once the Panthers were removed from the community, what filled the void?
Gangs. Now, I gotta say that most people, when I talk about gangs, when I talk about New York City outlaw gang culture, which is not like what most people know about gangs. So outlaw gang culture basically meant outlaw. If you look at the old Western movies, you always had these outlaws, and a lot of times the outlaws had on black hats. So outlaw basically meant you believed in justice, but you wanted to get justice outside of the law, because the establishment itself did not give you the proper adjustment. So understanding that the gangs back then, the original formation of our gangs were initially block crews, which was the job of taking the place of the Black Panthers to be the security for the community. Unfortunately, because a lot of guys got egos, and as the gang started growing, guys started wanting more turf, and it became violent after that, but it didn't start out that way. In fact, the Savage Skulls, which were one of the biggest gangs in our neighborhood, the original purpose for them was to get the drug dealers out of the neighborhood. If your house got robbed, you didn't call 911, you talked to a gang president or a warlord, like myself, because I was a warlord, to handle the situation. And it would be their job to find out who robbed your house and to try to get your property back, or make restitution, or serve justice, whether it was, beating somebody down or whatever happened.
So let's talk a little bit more about the structure, because you told me about the structure of the gangs. So the structure of the gangs and also the age of the gang.
We're talking about basically from 8 years old to 16 years old. After 16, whatever you did, you went to jail for it. And basically anything else you did before that, you were tried as a juvenile. So we had that in mind. So most of the stuff that we did and all the violent stuff that we did, we tried to get it in during those years that we knew we weren't going to serve time at Rikers Island. We didn't want to go to Rikers Island because, it was like going to hell. So most of the times, and like I said, I joined my first gang when I was 9. It's different for us because we learned gang life young. And it was order. You had a president, you had a vice president, and you had a warlord, which was also a spokesman. And some gangs had Gestapos. The Gestapo's job was to discipline other gang members who got out of control. So gangs had their own sense of order and control where, if you did something that the gang didn't appreciate, the Gestapo would come along and, you don't know, you may be beaten, you may be whatever happened to you, that's what happened. But there was always correction in the gang.
Mm-hmm. About how many gangs existed in the South Bronx and how many gang members?
In the South Bronx itself, in the South Bronx is just one area of the Bronx, probably 11,000 just in the South Bronx, but New York City, probably 80 to 90,000 gang members.
So just in that section of the Bronx, the South Bronx,
just in that section of the Bronx,
about 11,000 gang members.
At least that. About 100 gangs, because I'm just talking about what the police have documented.
Right.
Because there's a lot of gangs nobody knew about.
Yes.
And let me say this about the police when I'm talking about it. We didn't hate the police. We considered the police our, basically, just like another gang, because we outnumbered the police. Block crews started out with like 25 guys, but it grew to hundreds and it grew to thousands to where, there were 40,000 cops in New York. But gangs outnumbered the police, so basically we ran the streets, we ran the security, we didn't hate the cops, but we didn't let them on our block without permission. They could not, if you ever saw this movie, Fort Apache, it's an old movie, Fort Apache, The Bronx with Paul Newman. You see people throwing garbage cans off of the cops. Because if they came on our block without permission, that's what happened. We controlled the neighborhood, and if they wanted permission to come on the block to arrest somebody, they had to ask a gang leader.
Were there a lot of outlets for the youth in the South Bronx during this time? Like after school programs, arts programs?
Yeah, day camp. which was another problem because if you went to day camp, you had to go to another gang's territory. So that was a problem. Actually, I had my first concussion in day camp when I was 9 years old, going to the school that wasn't on my block, and I got beat down and had a concussion and had to be hospitalized.
Tough conditions. I think folks organize when they feel threatened. Gangs are a natural consequence, and we use the language gangs. You automatically get an image of what it is, but to me, a gang is a group of people who come together to support each other.
It's a family.
Yeah, most definitely. And they fill in the gaps. Tell me about the Ghetto Brothers.
You had the Black Panther Party, a political party, just like Democrats and Republicans. You had the Young Lords, and you had FAL, and you had a lot of different organizations. I think in Los Angeles they had the SLA, some of these organizations. But anyway, these organizations were more caretakers of the community. When they were taken down, because they were taken down, gangs became the established authority in the community. Now the Ghetto Brothers, unlike most gangs, because basically your reputation grew by your ability to be vicious and brutal. If you look at murders and go look up murders in New York City, you see that in 2021 there's 429 murders and everybody's complaining about that. In 1971 there were 1,379 murders in New York City. So we were brutal, but the Ghetto Brothers heard the message of the Black Panthers and the Young Lords and these organizations that were saying, listen, you people are destroying your own community. You'll need to wake up. So most of us were so involved in the violence, we didn't really want to hear that. But the Ghetto Brothers were like, you know, they're right. Well, they start having the same food. In fact, they still have food programs now and clothing giveaways. They started this, and they started cleaning up the neighborhood. They would go down certain streets and, you know, get brooms and garbage cans, and they would clean the community. And they became kind of like the social workers of the community, where we had the roughnecks like us, but then we had the social workers who were the Ghetto Brothers. Now, they were still a gang, but they were doing stuff that they heard the Young Lords and the Black Panthers telling them to do. Listen, you guys got to stop killing each other and, you know, work for something positive. And they got that message, and they were trying to do that. So they were loved and honored in our community, the Ghetto Brothers.
Yeah. And one of the things that the Ghetto Brothers did was appoint a peace council, right?
Yes. The Ghetto Brothers, because like I said, there were presidents, vice president, warlord, and Gestapo. Now, the Ghetto Brothers created something different, and they brought in what was called a peace council. Black Benji. When you joined the gang, they gave you a name. Like the president of the Ghetto Brothers' name was Yellow Benji. They named him Yellow Benji because his wife was Chinese. So everybody had like a slang name, like Staff. His name was, they called him Corky because they said his head looked like a coconut. And that's why I got the name Topaz. So the president of the gang, he called me Topaz. He said, you're special, you're like a jewel. And I said, you're right. So I kept that name since 1970, and I still call myself Topaz to this day because I am a jewel. So anyway, the Ghetto Brothers decided to have Black Benji become a peace council, which was unheard of. Because like I said, you were known for your brutality. Your brutality is what gave you a reputation back then. So for them to sort of anoint, because that's what I wanted to say, a peace counselor, that was a very brave move for them, because it's like, okay, you're going to respect this guy because, like I said, you weren't known for making peace, but they did appoint a peace council, and it kind of gave us a lot of hope that the killing would stop, because there was killing. Basically, every day you see these killings, and your friend got killed, your brother got killed, your sister got thrown off a roof, and basically so much killing, you're just waiting your turn to die. But when they appointed a peace counselor, that was like a ray of hope to say, oh, maybe things could change.
And there had to be some credibility for the Ghetto Brothers, but also credibility for Benji.
Most of us and most gang members were teenagers. So Black Benji was actually a heroin addict, because there was a lot of heroin, you know, in the late 60s, early 70s. Guys were coming back from Vietnam, strung out on heroin. Guys were nodding out in the corner. Everybody was on heroin. Benji was a heroin addict who went cold turkey with the Ghetto Brothers and kicked the habit and then began, ministering to young guys in the neighborhood like myself. I was, 12 years old in 1970. So, he would, come in the neighborhood and just talk to us and tell us, listen, don't do that. You gotta stop fighting. Just trying to giving us a positive outlook on life, so we wouldn't, wind up dead or in jail, which most people were.
Fast forward, we had a creation of this peace counselor by a gang who understands the importance and value of community.
3 gangs were coming after another gang. The gangs that were fighting were actually not from our neighborhood, because basically they came to fight on our neighborhood, but it wasn't anybody in our neighborhood that they were actually going to fight. So because it was on our territory, Black Benji, who was third in command as the peace counselor, decided to go and try to prevent this rumble. He gets there with about 25 other members of the Ghetto Brothers, and when they turn the corner, they see, I don't know, there's 500, 600, 700 guys. Because like I said, gangs started out like 25, 30 members, but it grew to where the Ghetto Brothers alone had 2,500 members in the Bronx alone, but they branched out to other boroughs. So there's hundreds of guys. When you have rumbles in the Bronx, you have hundreds and hundreds of guys fighting. So this particular day, he went to break up this rumble as a peace counselor to try to talk them out of fighting.
And he kind of said, no, let me try to squash it, right?
Let me try to squash it.
Because the Ghetto Brothers could have just...
They could have left it alone.
Yeah.
They mind their own business, which was kind of against what they were trying to do, which was bring the community together. So they really, because the president of Ghetto Brothers now told me, they didn't know who he was. Had they known who he was, they wouldn't have killed him. And another thing I want to say about killing him is that, we graduated to a place where guys, the killing was something they enjoyed, so they took it personally. We didn't have a lot of drive-by shootings back then. Even though guys had guns, they preferred to beat you to death because they wanted to make it more personal, and they didn't want it to be fast. So basically, they beat Black Benji to death. After that, all hell broke loose in the South Bronx.
Right. What happened to make this decision to not further retaliate?
The original concept was to avenge Black Benji's death. Now, me, myself, personally, starting out at 9 years old, he said, oh, weren't you 9? Weren't you afraid? And I said, okay, yeah, I was afraid at first. But the fear grew to acceptance. The acceptance grew to enjoyment. The enjoyment grew to addiction. So by that time, I was addicted to the violence. So a lot of stuff that they fought over, to me, it was silly. Guys, oh, you looked at my rumble. Oh, rumble starts. Oh, you stepped on my foot. Oh, rumble starts. Or some silly reason. And I was like, this stuff that everybody's fighting about is stupid. But Black Benji got killed because, like I said, he was a beacon of hope. Most gangs in that area said, okay, we're going to war. Which, like I said, a lot of the wars were silly, but that was actually the only war that I saw worthwhile fighting over.
What stopped it? Why didn't the war happen?
The Ghetto Brothers, Savage Skulls, Savage Nomads, Roman Kings, Ghetto Wolves, all of these gangs united. So we had about maybe 300 or 400 guys that were going to retaliate against the killers of Black Benji. Now, the president of the Ghetto Brothers, you had a president and you had a founder. Yellow Benji was the founder. A guy named Carlos Suarez was the president. Now, Carlos was more of a violent, where Benji was more affected by the hippie movement. Actually, the Ghetto Brothers had a band, but they made the decision to go see Black Benji's mother to pay respects and to talk to her to let her know that they were going to avenge her son's death. When they got to her house and they said, listen, we have an army outside and we're going to go kill everybody that was involved in killing your son. And she said, no, my son died for peace. And Charlie and Benji said, what? She said, my son died for peace. So what they got was 40 Bronx gangs at the time to agree to come to a meeting. They got the police to work security outside. The police were not allowed in the meeting. But they got the police to stand outside just in case everything jumped off. Was you had presidents, vice presidents, and warlords from only 40 gangs. There were more gangs than that, but 40 showed up to the meeting to sign a peace treaty saying that there would be no revenge and that all the current beefs that were going on would be squashed at this meeting. And that was all because they couldn't disrespect Black Benji's mom. In those days, a mother in the neighborhood was considered high quality. She was considered a queen. A mother, anybody's mother could correct you on the street, gang member or no gang member. You said something foul. Any mother on that street could correct you. And you disrespected her, something was going to happen to you. So a mother in those days had that kind of influence to say no more, and they listened to her.
So really the impetus was this mother's wishes to see no more violence in the name of her son. He was for peace. 40 gangs came together,
signed a peace treaty.
And so Topaz and some of his partners put together a documentary, and they actually have images from this meeting of the gangs. And for you educational practitioners, it's very much like a restorative circle. They sat in a circle, and each member got to speak about what they felt about the issue, about how they felt about the gangs and the violence and everything happening. And as a result of that, and remember, while we saying this, the ages of these gang members, these are not 30-year-old men and women. These are what we would say are children. Recognizing that in that moment, self, community, that knowledge of self, and understanding that life is precious, and taking the action to quell beef in a very violent environment in which you hear, to show that type of compassion and empathy could get you killed. They made that decision today. It's hard to dispute the 4 elements of hip hop. Most refer to as being MCing, DJing, breaking, and graffiti. What would you say about the 5th element, knowledge, and what it means?
Let me say this. Hip hop culture and the business that they call hip hop, it's not the same thing. The business of hip hop, which is a multi-billion-dollar worldwide industry, was pulled out of hip hop culture. But there's a big difference. Like if I say things to you like, there's no rap in hip hop culture. Everybody say, what are you talking about? Hip hop is rap. No, it's not. This peace treaty is what birthed hip hop culture in New York City, South Bronx.
If we want to extract parts and pieces of hip hop without the important and crucial element of knowledge and knowledge of self and understanding that life is valuable, you don't have the essence of hip hop. That's why what you see today is probably more negative than anything else.
You know, when they came out with the first, what they call rap record, I said, it's over. Why? Because once you put a price on yourself, then somebody else can say, well, you're only worth something if you make this much money. So now the kids today, all they know about hip hop is whoever sold the most records, who had the platinum album, who had the most Grammy awards, who had the most awards, who was the most, that qualifies it now when what qualified it back then was your love for the community and your love for the, really, your love for yourself. Because if you don't love yourself, you can't even love your community. Love yourself and do you love your community? Because that's the whole thing that created hip hop culture. Love for self and love for community.
Without this truce, you do not have this cross-pollination of communities, the ability to go from community and community and to dance and to grab the mic and MC and to be a writer in terms of graffiti. So hip hop does not exist without the opportunity for these young people to go across their community safely and engage in these activities. And we know that some of those activities actually took the place of fighting. Now, you disrespect me, we're gonna battle it out by dancing. Right, and that's where the energy comes
And
from.
the discovery that you even knew how to dance, or you knew how to MC, which was mic control or master ceremonies, not necessarily rap. First of all, graffiti or writing, as we call it, we didn't call ourselves graffiti artists. That's something that they called us because they called us graffiti vandals, because we wrote on subways. And like I said, a lot of it had to do with the hippie movement, because we were looking at these long-haired guys playing guitar and had buses with peace signs on them, with crazy names on them, like Moonglow in the 60s. And these basically German Volkswagen. They had these Volkswagen buses, which were, like I said, they psychedelic colors. They smoked a lot of weed and made love. So that influenced us with this more, because we had the Vietnam War going on at the same time. But they were like, well, make love, not war. And we were at war already, so the hippie movement influenced us to say, hey, let's get high. And that's why everybody started smoking weed. I think the hippie movement brought that into play with us. But also, the writing on the bus and changing their names was also something that we did. So we started writing on subways, because just like cavemen, your writing, your tag, or as they call it, it let people know you existed. That's how we know they were cavemen, because we found the writing in the caves. So we had the same concept. Well, if we write our names, it gave us a kind of a awareness of self-esteem to say, well, if we write our names on the subway or these buses and we watch them going by, people will remember us. We wanted to be remembered. We wanted to find our self-worth. So the first element of hip-hop, which is writing, or graffiti, which they call it, I call it writing because that was the original name of it, because we wanted to be known. We wanted to feel like we counted. If I saw my name, Topaz, going by on the train, I was like, wow, I'm somebody, because I knew, about 2 million people ride the subway in New York City every day. So that's a chance for 2 million people to see Topaz go by, so they're gonna know who I am. I'm gonna feel important, in other words.
And then your friends can see that and affirm it.
Exactly.
The city was on the edge of bankruptcy.
The Bronx was like a world of its own.
In the early 70s, man, crime was like the major income of the Bronx.
There were gangs literally in every corner. The violence was everywhere. You could feel the tension in the air. You could see the fights across the street. You could hear the shouting at nighttime.
The South Bronx Fort Apache was out of control. They were running through the streets. They were burning everything. I mean, pandemonium hit.
We lost a member that they viciously murdered him out there in the street. Now it's an eye for an eye.
The Bronx was going to be bathed in blood.
How rumors spread. There was not a gang in the whole of New York that was not aware of what's happening.
It's like the movie The Warriors, when the ladies on the radio talking about, hey, boppers, you got to make that move.
Let's get down to it, boppers. We're going to have to do better out there.
Peace after the treaty came instantaneous.
President Young Sinners, Vice President the Young Sinners, Vice President Young Saints.
When we gang busted, we stood in the same area. Now we are able to go here, go there, meet more people, unite with people.
Here's where the whole thing started to change. Little by little, that's when the music started to come into the deal.
Well, hip-hop came from gang culture.
Herc started something his enemies didn't want to stop. It came in the form of music.
It was more like challenging to dance now and not to fight.
We made a way to have fun, and we made a way to feel like we counted, and we made a way to show the world that we actually existed.
Actor comedian Jim Carrey produced this for us.
Wow.
He really helped us out a lot, because you would be surprised how hard it is to talk to people about peace. I mean, it took us 8 years to get this documentary out, but like I said, Jim Carrey came along. Actually, Robert De Niro, the actor Robert De Niro, he has an outreach in New York where he deals with at-risk youth. He saw the documentary and showed it to his youth. He talked to Jim Carrey, who helped us get it out there.
I happened to stumble across it when it was on Netflix.
Yeah. And Chuck D is doing the story now.
And Chuck D is doing a
Chuck D is
story.
doing the story on August 10th on Audible, telling the story, same story.
And just to tell you how the divine connection works, so
And we got our street thing.
I met you through James Cooper, who is my brother from another mother that's also an educator in the community. At James Cooper's Main Street art event, and I was telling him about the documentary. He's like, oh, let me show you somebody. And introduced me to Topaz, and then we started talking about it, and it was in my head the whole time because I'm 49 years old. I'll be 50 in February. I was born with hip hop. I'm gonna talk to you about teaching, using this as pedagogy, but it's always who I've been. This is how I've always interacted to my students. And it's always contained the 5 elements, not just the 4.
MCing is not rapping. And an MC's job was to get the crowd involved, interact with the crowd, bring them to a place of enjoying themselves. Because like I said, you got violence, so the music was a place of escape. Music wasn't supposed to be violent. The music was the place that you came to get away from the violence. So an MC's job was to ease your mind, and when you talk about MCing or rapping, which really it's all gang culture because it came from chanting, which was really cadence. We chanted to psych ourselves up for a rumble or something like that. I'll give you an example. It would go something like, we are the ghetto wolves, the mighty, mighty ghetto wolves. We are the ghetto wolves, the mighty, mighty ghetto wolves. Everywhere we go, people want to know who we are. So we tell them, we are the ghetto wolves, the mighty, mighty ghetto wolves. Am I right or wrong? You're right. Am I right or wrong? You're right. Sound off, 1, 2, sound off, 3, 4. Bring it on down. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's what we did. But it turned into something different.
Right.
Because it became entertainment, at least to us, because original hip hop was not made to be for the soul. It was made for the streets.
Mm-hmm. Those chants we learned from Little League football. And it's still call and response. Yeah. You had a captain saying the chant, and the rest of the team sounds off. Yeah. It's still call and response. And the energy exchange, the knowledge of self envelops all the elements inside of it. A continuation of Black and brown people's historical struggle to fight oppression and disenfranchisement in the United States. Automatically, it connects to a history. Hip hop is not just them wild kids with their pants hanging. It's actually a connection to people who have always fought oppression in the United States. An acknowledgement of the value of an individual's life and the lives of those represented in a collective community. It's about I am somebody. We are somebody. We deserve to be here. We have a space here. It's ours. A conscious choice to choose life and love over death. All right? The imagery that we see due to the commodification of hip hop would tell you something different. If you go across the world and you ask them what is hip hop in America, I guarantee you they'll have a negative image of it in certain spaces. But the real ones know what hip hop culture really means. What does this element mean for teaching and supporting students? It's a strategy to promote positive school culture. I know a lot of y'all know about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 interventions. The 5 elements of hip hop, when used properly, can be used as a tier 1 universal intervention in your area and space. Does that mean you come in with gold chains and Kangos? No. You embrace the essence of the elements, including knowledge and the respect of the individual, the respect of the entire community, and you communicate that to everybody in there so we treat everybody equally with love, respecting life. It's not subject-based. I have not seen an approach to applying hip-hop culture overall. I've seen it placed on certain subjects. Oh, we could do it in art. Oh, we could do it in gym. I'm talking about the entire way you approach education as a result of the 5 elements of hip hop culture. So it's not subject-based, but a principle that grounds all of our actions and should be used in all school spaces. The custodian, knows the 5 elements of hip hop. The custodian knows what it means to have knowledge of self, acknowledges the value in all members of the school community, regardless of where they come from and how they choose to identify themselves. Hip hop is not concerned with that. Hip hop is not concerned with where you come from or how you identify. What it is concerned with is that you love yourself, you respect yourself, you love others, you respect them as well, and give them the opportunity to shine when it's their time. What about the other elements? DJ is technology-based. DJs are scientists at heart. They are innovators. This element exemplifies the ingenuity and creativity of hip-hop. It also represents what is at the core of the culture, taking something old and making it an entirely new thing that speaks a new language. Think about what these young men did without mentors. Well, they had the Ghetto Brothers. And the value of the Panthers was passed on to the Ghetto Brothers. But before the Panthers, it was the Deacons for Defense. It was Harriet Tubman. It's this connection to historic resistance. Taking something old and making it new. By using 2 turntables to extend the instrumentals of various records, DJs became the orchestrators and innovators of the culture, but at their core, they were scientists, mastering technology while simultaneously creating new tech, hypothesizing what sounds could do, and ultimately finding the perfect blend to move the crowds. MCing, and yeah, we spelled it differently. We want to separate ourselves from just the regular old masters of ceremonies. Wordsmiths, the orator, the mic controller, they control the crowd. They capture your attention. They're the main ones speaking, right? And all our students contain an element of these personifications within them. And they should learn other ones too. MCing may very well have the most drastic evolutionary arc of all the elements. At one time, the show was the DJs. The MC merely provided transitions to interludes or updated the crowds on important information pertaining to the party. In that respect, master of ceremonies didn't hold much weight when compared to what the MC came to be. These wordsmiths with braggadocious punchlines, slick wordplay, and a flair for capturing the attention of partygoers became the main aspect of the show. More than just storytellers, MCs began to create dreamscapes that entangled the listener into tales of the urban diaspora. Breakers, b-boys, b-girls, tactile, physical, movement-oriented, interpretive, how you take these words and put them into physical form so other folks can understand them who can't access the language. These are all educational skills. Breaking may be the most dynamic of all the elements of hip hop. The stylistic moves, astonishing feats of strength, incalculable body control, and outright mind-boggling physical expression of emotions have captivated onlookers of b-boys and b-girls since the beginning of the hip hop era. Today, breaking is an Olympic event. A far cry from its beginnings is a way for energized crews to dance out their beefs instead of fighting. Graffiti artists, or as Topaz informed us, writers. Graffiti is what they call it so they can put you in jail. It's visual, it's abstract, a view from a different lens. You heard the word psychedelic. How can I imagine this space differently? How can I take this plain, drab ugliness in front of me that says nothing about who I am and where I live and make it something beautiful? A strong argument can be made for the artistic merit of each of the elements of hip hop, but none more vividly reflect the complex visual expression of the culture more than graffiti or writing. As such, writing also speaks to the socio-political elements of the culture in a way that forces others to take notice. As the issues faced by inner city residents were ignored, so were the lives of those who inhabited these neglected spaces. More than anything, graffiti was a way for Black and brown youth to boldly shout out, "We are here, we matter," like it or not. Final thoughts on using all 5 elements as a tool for pedagogy and intervention. Just as in hip hop culture, the 4 elements all spring from the element of knowledge. If you want to use this as a tool in your school or classroom, you have to start with knowledge of self and the value of life and love. That's where you get respect. That is what I've always done in my classrooms. Before we get to the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s, I got to tell you why I'm here. I got to share with you my story of how I got here. You need to share with me your stories of how you got here. And we're going to build together. Centering knowledge connects to other elements in a way that can disrupt negative school culture. Project-based learning activities, youth participatory action research activities, cross-curricular significance. It's not just bringing the kids in the class to do artwork, all right? You can actually take the 5 elements and create student characteristics or student assignments based on them. Knowledge, you're the one that keeps it all together to make sure that everybody has a voice. Everybody has a voice. DJing, you're the technology person. You handle the slides. You handle the PowerPoint. You handle YouTube and TikTok. I'm gonna catch up one day. All right. Breaking, b-boying, b-girling. You're the one that takes this and makes it a physical interpretation for those who can't sit in their seat. How you gonna get them involved? They ain't gonna just sit there and listen to y'all talk the whole time. They need to be involved. And what graffiti? How do you dress it up? How do you make it pretty? Okay. Now that was the quick rundown. A tool for amplifying mindfulness, restorative practices, trauma-informed supports, culturally responsive classrooms and schools. I'll just give it to you like this. How many Buffalo educators in here? Do y'all still do the social academic instruction groups? Dad, it's only been 3 years, y'all. Come on. Okay, how many people still remove students from a classroom and send them to another classroom? Does that still happen in districts? Yes? Okay, y'all don't have to say it too loud because it ain't right, especially if you ain't doing nothing with them. But when they come in the classroom, if they already know what element they most agree with or relate to, you find out what that element is, and through that element and the way they interact with the world, you tell them to notate what happened. Spit something. Give me a dance. Use the technology. Make a TikTok. That's how you engage them when they come into that space, as opposed to letting them just sit there and rock. And that's just the first step. That's just the first step. Please scan that for the survey. While you're doing that, I'm going to sit down and answer any questions. Me and Topaz will answer questions.
When I thought about what you were saying about the gangs and outlaws, I thought about Africa Bambaataa.
Yeah, okay.
So that was...
Yeah, so Bambaataa was in a gang called the Black Spades, which was, Ebony Dukes, let me say Ebony Dukes. Ebony Dukes were made up of Ghetto Brothers, the Black Spades, and the Savage Skulls. So Bambaataa, he took the Black Spades and he created something that's called Zulu Nation.
Yeah.
So Zulu Nation was kind of like one of the first, the Ebony Dukes was the first Bronx graffiti crew. But Zulu Nation was kind of like the first, what you would call, that was portraying the true form of hip hop in terms of love, peace, and community. So they were once mainly Black Spades, which was probably, I want to say, the biggest gang in the Bronx, because there were, I know for a fact, at least 28 divisions of Black Spades, and each division probably had about 30 to 45 members. So they had 28 divisions, and I hung with that gang, and one of my best friends was actually my bodyguard these days. He had his own division of Black Spades. So Bambaataa really did do a good job of transitioning these young teenagers into basically DJs and MCs and breakdancers. There were others besides Bambaataa that did that, but he was a major contributor. He's in Rebel Kings, by the way. So was Kool Herc, who also was a writer as well. But yeah, he did a good job with transitioning Black Spade gang members into Zulu Nation, and basically became peaceful.
And this is reflective of, I think, a historical thing, because we know about Harriet Tubman and we know about Medgar Evers, but we know that there were so many unknown and unnamed folks who did great work locally and regionally that never got their name mentioned. And that's why stories are so important.
13-year-old kids in the Bronx saw Rebel Kings and decided that a street in the Bronx should be named after Black Benji. Now, 13-year-olds did this. It took them 4 years, but I guess a couple of weeks ago, it just passed. They finally got the city of New York to name a street commemorating Black Benji. Actually, the street that he got killed on. They named that street Black Benji Way because of 13-year-olds that saw Rubber Kings.
And wasn't that through their school counselor?
Yeah,
It was a school counselor.
Bonnie Massey.
Yeah. And I mean, so this has applications not just for educational purposes in classes, but also for the mental health supports.
Yes.
Because she was a school counselor.
She was a school counselor, yeah.
I saw this documentary with by LL Cool J Nas, I forgot what it's called, and it was showing whatever these gangs in the or whatever hip hop culture, but gangs in Queens, and then the mayor of New York was in some gang too.
Sure.
When he was young, so it's like
Yeah, gang culture. Let me say this about gang culture. Gang culture is New York culture because what happened was most immigrants that came to New York formed gangs. Little Italy, the Bowery became Irish gangs. You know, everybody. My ancestors came from the South into Harlem. Actually, Ebony Dukes was started out as a gang in the 1940s in Harlem, and later on became us in the Bronx. But you know, New York was gang culture. Now, I don't know how old you guys are, but if anybody's my age, you used to watch the Little Rascals on TV as kids, or the East Side Kids, or the Bowery Boys. You know, they don't realize the Little Rascals, they were a block gang.
yeah.
And that's what we saw growing up in the 60s. And we emulated the Little Rascals. We went outside, we played games. We, like the Bowery Boys, we were organized. I mean, we basically emulated what we saw on television. And it was part of New York culture, just gang culture itself. Yeah. It still is, really, but not like it used to be. But it's still...
It was very interesting. I'm glad I can.
So there is one question. How can we as educators and administrators begin to create a level of consciousness about this in our schools? Do the work. I mean, you can call me, get in contact with Topaz. I'll put the information up next. Will there be a part 2 in some form, somewhere, somehow?